The crimson sun of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the crystalline plains as Zarthek, the apex predator of his homeworld, found himself in an impossible situation. His massive 8-foot frame trembled not from cold, but from desperation. The Vorthic warrior, whose species had conquered 17 star systems through sheer brutality, stood before the most unlikely creature in the galaxy, a human doctor. Sarah Chun looked up from her xenobiology research station, her brown eyes meeting the 6 burning amber orbs of the towering alien. Behind Zarthek, 2 small cubs, no larger than Earth house cats, but covered in iridescent scales, mewed softly, their own eyes wide with hunger and fear. "Please," Zarthek's voice rumbled through his universal translator, each word seeming to pain him. "The poison, ... It spreads through my system. I have perhaps 1 rotation before." He gestured weakly at his cubs. "They are barely past there. First molting. Without me, they will not survive the night cycle." Sarah had been on this research outpost for 3 months, studying the unique ecosystem of this frontier world. She knew the Vorthic reputation. They were the boogeymen of the galaxy, the species that made even the warlike Klingons look peaceful. Yet here was their greatest warrior, humbling himself before a human he could crush with 1 claw. "You want me to watch them?" Sarah asked, though she already knew her answer. The cubs had begun to approach her, drawn by some instinct she didn't understand. "I have no choice," Zarthek admitted, his pride visibly cracking. "My ship detected your biosignature. You are ... compatible. The cubs sense it too. They do not fear you as they should." Without waiting for her response, Zarthek collapsed. The poison from a Zarian spine worm he'd encountered while hunting was already shutting down his nervous system. As his consciousness faded, his last sight was of the human female gently scooping up his cubs, cradling them against her chest with impossible tenderness. What happened next would become legend across a dozen star systems. Sarah's first challenge came within hours. The cubs, whose names she learned were Crix and Zeph, refused the protein paste from her emergency rations. They grew weaker, their tiny bodies shivering despite the heated shelter. Most species would have watched them die, except in the natural order. Humans, however, had a peculiar defect in their programming. Through trial and error, Sarah discovered they could digest a mixture of synthesized amino acids and mineral supplements from her lab equipment. She worked through the night, manually feeding them drop by drop, her own sleep forgotten. When Crix developed a fever, she held him against her chest for hours, her body heat regulating his temperature while she monitored his vital signs. But the real transformation began on the 3rd day. Sarah started talking to them. Not the simple commands one might give to animals, but actual conversation. She explained her research, described Earth's blue skies and vast oceans, shared stories of human exploration and discovery. The cubs, whose species was thought to be incapable of higher reasoning until their adult metamorphosis, began to respond. Crick started imitating her speech patterns. Zeph began manipulating simple tools, watching intently as Sarah demonstrated laboratory procedures. Within a week, they were solving basic puzzles that most adult Vorthic found challenging. The breakthrough came when Sarah introduced them to music. She had been playing Beethoven's Ninth Symphony while working late one night when she noticed both cubs had stopped eating to listen. Their scales, normally a muted gray, began to shimmer with colors that shifted in harmony with the music. It was then that Sarah realized what was happening. She wasn't just caring for these cubs. She was raising them. The concept was alien to Vorthic culture. Their young were expected to survive through strength and cunning alone. Weakness was coded naturally, strength rewarded with survival. But Sarah was giving them something their species had never known: unconditional nurturing combined with intellectual stimulation. She taught them to read using her tablet computer. She showed them how to conduct scientific experiments. She played games with them that developed both their strategic thinking and their empathy. Most remarkably, she treated their mistakes not as failures to be punished, but as learning opportunities to be embraced. 3 weeks after Zarthek's collapse long range, sensors detected an approaching Vorthik warship. Sarah knew they were coming for the Cubs and likely to eliminate any witnesses to their leader's moment of vulnerability. She prepared for the worst but continued caring for Crix and Zeph as if nothing had changed. When the Vorthik boarding party burst into her research station, weapons drawn, they stopped in absolute shock. The Cubs, barely a month old, were demonstrating a complex mathematical proof on Sarah's holographic display. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of confidence rather than fear, their scales displaying patterns of color that veteran Vortex scholars recognize as indicators of advanced cognitive development. Most impossible of all, they were teaching each other, building upon concepts in real-time collaboration. "This is ... impossible," whispered Sub-Commander Dektar. In Vortex society, such intellectual development didn't occur until the second metamorphosis at age 7 cycles. Sarah stood protectively in front of the Cubs, though she knew her human frame could offer little physical resistance. They're remarkable students. They just needed someone to believe in their potential. What happened next shocked even Sarah. Crix and Zeph moved to stand beside her, not cowering behind her, but flanking her like equals. Their small voices rang clear through the chamber. "Sarah teacher is Pac Bon," Crix declared, using a Vorthik term that roughly translated to family chosen by choice. "We protect Pac Bon as Pac Bon protects us." The boarding party exchanged glances. In 3 weeks, this human had accomplished something their entire civilization had deemed impossible. She had raised Vorthik Cubs not just to survive, but to thrive, think, and feel loyalty to something beyond their own survival. Sub-Commander Dektar slowly lowered his weapon. "The matriarchs must see this," he said quietly. Later, as medical teams worked to revive Zarthek from his poison-induced coma, the Cubs refused to leave Sarah's side. They had imprinted on her not just as a caregiver, but as something their language had no word for: a parent who loved unconditionally while demanding excellence, who provided safety while encouraging growth. When Zarthek finally awakened, his first sight was of his Cubs demonstrating quantum physics principles to a group of fascinated Vorthik scientists, while Sarah watched with obvious pride. The Cubs had grown larger, stronger, and far more intelligent than should have been possible. But more than that, they radiated a confidence and joy that was utterly alien to his species. "What did you do to them?" he asked Sarah, wonder evident. In his voice, Sarah smiled, watching as Crix successfully explained photosynthesis to his father. "I just loved them and taught them to love learning. Sometimes that's all anyone needs to become extraordinary." As news of the human miracle spread across Vorthik space, it sparked a revolution in their understanding of child-rearing and education. But for Sarah, the greatest reward came each night when 2 young Vorthik Cubs would curl up beside her, their scales glowing softly with contentment, proving that sometimes the most profound victories come not through conquest, but through compassion. The Predator had left his Cubs with a human and discovered that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tenacity. It was their infinite capacity to nurture potential into greatness.